In 1878, two dudes, Dutch and Hosea, are like, hey, what if we made a place with no rules, governments, or anything? Kinda like Epstein's Island, but with a gunslinger twist. A utopia, if you may. They're both like, hell yeah, let's do it. Except, they need more than just two people. So Dutch goes old Batman mode trying to recruit some Robins. He grabs a petty thief named Arthur Morgan, a hobo called Bill, a pretty boy called Sean, a cook named Simon, and you need diversity, so a few girls like Abigail and Molly. Of course, there are other people, like an absolute piece of trash called Micah, but we'll get to that in a bit. Finally, a drunk guy who literally just showed up and everyone started calling him Uncle, to feel like a family, I guess. In fact, to complete the whole family vibe, one of the members, John Marston, gets Abigail pregnant with his son, Jack Marston. But then he's like, nah, I don't want to be a dad. So he goes out on a milk fetch quest. But surprisingly, he actually returns after a year because of, guilt? Guess he ain't that bad after all. Anyway, all's good, they became the Van der Linde gang. But now, they need money. So Dutch, being the genius plan maker that he is, was like, hey boys, let's go pull off a heist in Blackwater. Except, the thing is, around this time, the US is turning into a law-abiding nation, and the wild western frontier is pretty much holding on thin straws. So, when the gang does try the heist, they get outnumbered by a shit ton of cops. Some got shot, and most had to bail, or they get their asses yeeted in jail. So now, they're hiding in mountains of Coulter. But it's cold enough to freeze your nuts off, so they help a lady in distress, Sadie, by beating up a bunch of hillbillies who call themselves the O'Driscolls, and in return, she offers them shelter. All's good, but wait, everyone is like, where the fuck is John? Arthur tells one of the gang members, Javier, to put down his taco and help him find John in the mountains. Turns out, John hates furries and thought he was Mike Tyson, so he picked a fight with a pack of snow doggies. He barely survives with a lot of scars, but Arthur eventually finds his dumbass. They get back to the camp where Dutch has yet another plan. Remember the hillbillies? Well, Dutch has a score to settle with their leader, Colm O'Driscoll, so he's like, boys, let's raid him like it's Clash of Clans. And like all great leaders, Colm runs away, but one of the members gets captured by Arthur. The dude snitches on his team, probably because of Dutch's luscious mustache, and totally not due to torture at all, revealing that his gang members were planning to rob a train owned by a high-profile corporate baron by the name of Leviticus Cornwall. But Dutch is like, not if I have something to say about it. The gang intervenes during the train robbery, but Old Man Cornwall is saltier than your favorite streamer's bathwater. He hires an infamous band of mercenaries posing as detectives, known as the Pinkertons, to bring the Van der Linde gang to justice. The two in charge of the Pinkertons are Andrew Milton and Edgar Ross. And believe me when I say, they're far worse than cockroaches because of the amount of time these dudes are about to show up. Oh, and remember the Blackwater heist? It went to shit because these fuckers were the ones to ambush the gang back then alongside the cops. Anyways, the gang leaves the mountains and sets up camp at Horseshoe Overlook and is trying to look for some honest minimum wage work while laying low as much as cowboys with guns and scars could really be. But a man recognizes Arthur and calls him an imposter, and all hell breaks loose. A bunch of shootouts happen, Micah gets arrested, and Dutch tells Arthur to break him out, but discreetly. Like so discreet that no one knows he was there. In and out. Not a sound. He's like, Dutch, I got it. Relax. So he just blows a giant hole in the prison wall, shoots everyone in town, goes on a high-speed horse chase, and almost dies. But hey, at least Micah is free. Then, as a part of a contract, Arthur goes to collect some money from a sick man named Thomas Downs. During their conflict, Downs ends up coughing blood on Arthur's face. And you might be like, so what? But just remember this, for later. More shit goes down, like Arthur meeting his ex-fiancée Mary Linton. He helps her find her brother and is like, hey, do you love me now? And she's like, oh my god, no, you kill people. So instead, Agent Merrill tries to give Arthur another chance at a normal life by betraying his gang. But being bitter from rejection, he's like, no, I kill people. And continues his path of gunslinging. Eventually, Cornwall shows up at the gang's hideout with his loyal Pinkertons and their oh-so-majestic horses and tries to confront the robbers. But, as you'd expect, a deadly shootout breaks out and the gang is like, we gotta get the fuck out of here. So they end up at a new town, Rhodes. Rhodes is busy in a completely different conflict between two insanely rich families over some sort of mythical treasure which literally could be some baddie's nudes. We never know. But Dutch, being the thirsty son of a bitch that he is, sees this as an opportunity for some high stunks and has yet another brilliant plan. The gang members try to play for both sides of the fence, doing everything in their power to turn the conflict into an all-out war. The idea here was to run off with the treasure, while these bitches keep shooting each other into oblivion. But guess what? Because it's a classic Dutch plan, literally the opposite happens. The families combine the 3 brain cells together to realize that they're being played hard, and they do an Uno reverse on the Vander Lindes. The gang is ambushed by the 2 families who are now in cahoots, and the pretty boy Sean Blackwater is killed. But hey, at least the conflict is over, I guess. In the chaos, the little kid of the gang, Jack Marston, is abducted by one of the families. This causes Arthur and the gang to go Hulk mode and burn down the Braithwaite Manor. Arthur pulls a Batman and asks, "Where is he?" to every member in the manor, but turns out they already sold Jack to an Italian-American mob boss, Angelo Bronte in Saint Denis, which is a lot more ahead in terms of technical advancements and industrialization. They go back and prepare to go to Saint Denis. But guess who shows up again? Agent Milton and Agent Ross. But this time, with an offer one cannot refuse. If Dutch turns himself in, the rest of the gang members will be pardoned and will be able to live freely. Dutch, being the honorable leader, can single-handedly save all of his gang members and let them live a peaceful life they've all wanted by simply turning himself in. All he has to do is say yes. So he says no. Like Team Rocket, Milton swears they'll be back, but the gang has more important matters to deal with, like a literal abducted child. They leave for Saint Denis and track Angelo Bronte, who surprisingly isn't too bothered about the kid. But he's a freaking mob boss, of course, so he wants some favors done before he returns Jack. Angelo provides Dutch with a tip about a trolley station heist, and Dutch goes into his planning mode, which is basically just stroking his beard while others get shit done. And for once, things don't flop harder than a DC movie, and the gang finally celebrates a win. Meanwhile, Arthur is tasked with robbing a riverboat casino, where he meets the Wapiti tribe leader, Rains Fall. They become best bros over their mutual distaste for the US Army and lawmen. During all of this, Arthur begins to develop a sort of code, which he thinks is simply because of Saint Denis and the smoke from the factories. Or I mean, probably an STD because he ain't exactly the protection kind. Anyways, the casino heist ultimately goes to shit. The O'Driscolls also make a return and beheads one of the gang members, and then dips. You know, the usual. This leaves the whole gang in a major cycle of depression, and Arthur tries telling Dutch to retire in his pursuit of the perfect harem party land. It just ain't worth it. So he yells at Arthur for not being idealistic, aka delusional as himself, and he is in no way ready to give up his life as a gunslinger and the pursuit of his dreamland. Honestly, it's kind of like trying to convince a Discord mod to touch grass. Anyways, Arthur crosses paths with Mary once again, and after simping, helping her, she actually ends up getting rizzed and asks him to leave his current life behind and run away with her to live happily ever after. But Arthur, being the poster boy doomed outlaw he is, rejects her offer because of his commitment to Dutch Vanderlinde and the rest of the gang. Bros before hoes, I guess. Dutch makes a plan to get revenge on Bronte. The gang pulls up and kidnaps him from his manor to get that dough as ransom money. They could probably get enough to maybe retire. All they've got to do is just keep the guy alive till his boys show up with the ransom money. No way you could fuck that up. Except, Dutch feeds Bronte to the alligators, and the whole plan goes to shit. Classic Dutch. But wait. Dutch has yet another plan, to rob a bank. And guess what? It also goes to shit when Milton shows up again, but with a crap ton of Pinkertons. This time killing one of the OG founders, Hosea, and arresting John Marston. The gang barely makes a narrow escape. The gang then board a boat bound for Cuba, which is then destroyed by a storm, washing them up on the shores of Gorma, where they're taken captive by a military hell-bent on beating the shit out of local workers, even if they're doing nothing wrong and just working. Maybe this was just the early stages of BDSM, we don't know. Anyways, workers have started a full-on campaign to overthrow the military and their leader Alberto Fassar. The gang members are like, "H together strong," and team up to kill Fassar and then fight our way back to the mainland with the help of the rebels. Oh, and Arthur's just there coughing all over the place. Dutch, Micah, and Arthur return to find the rest of the gang camped out at Lakay, except the Pinkertons show up again, and they all gotta run and find another place. But hold on a second. How the heck do these mofos always know where the gang is? Dutch, who is suspicious, calls an emergency meeting to find who the imposter is, and just like any messy Among Us meeting, an innocent person is exiled instead. And by exiled, I mean straight up shotgun to death. And during all of this, our boy John is still in prison, trying not to drop his soap. So, Arthur and Sadie are planning a prison break, but Arthur has a terrible coughing fit, like a boomer choking on a chess piece. Remember the guy from earlier who coughed blood on Arthur? Well, that infected Arthur with tuberculosis. And because a cure didn't exist back then, it's pretty much a free ticket to the afterlife. But hey, he still has enough time to fuck some shit up in the meantime. So, Sadie and Arthur go ahead with their plan, shoot up the place, and bring John back to the camp. Dutch has another one of his weekly fits and start doubting Arthur's loyalty, but through his mental breakdown, he manages to gun down one of the big bads, Cornwall. This leads to yet another shoot down with the Pinkertons. On the political side, tensions between the Wapiti tribe and the US Army are on the rise. Dutch uses this opportunity and, despite his wishes, exploit Arthur's friendship with the Chief Freen's false son, Eagle Flies, to lead an attack on the US Army compound. Much like Dutch's other plans, this goes terribly wrong and the Chief's son is killed. At this point, Dutch's leadership skills are pretty much under question. A few members start quitting, even the drunk-ass uncle leaves. You know shit is getting bad when even the drunk guy had to find another place to get drunk at. But besides all the odds, he has one final plan that should set the remaining gang members up for life. This one is going to be the plan. One to help outplan all the other plans. And it's pretty simple. There is an army train. They get on the train, they rob the train, and they get off. Easy gains. But how does that go? Well, the train carriage catches fire, John gets shot, Abigail gets abducted, and the gang ditches Arthur and Sadie. So, pretty good, I guess. But worry not, because Arthur and Sadie are up for another rescue mission. They find Abigail at Van Horn, and Arthur was like, "Say hello to my little friend," as he blows off Agent Milton's head. But before his death, Milton reveals that the mole is Micah. That absolute piece of trash. The only problem is, at this point, Micah is the only one whom Dutch trusts. So, when Arthur returns back to the camp like the Messiah to expose Micah, his allegations are shunned by Dutch. During all this, John makes his epic entrance and is like, "Why the heck did y'all leave me to die?" Now, everyone's pointing gun at each other like in a Mexican standoff. And of course, the freaking Pinkertons appear yet again to raid the camp. Everyone's fleeing for their lives, shots are being fired, and people are dying left, right, and center. But apparently, Arthur decides now is the best time to have a mushy moment. Like a father figure, Arthur advises John to leave his life of crime and go back to his family. And as an emotional token, Arthur gives John his hat and tells him to go. Then, in an epic moment of glory, he proceeds to fight off Micah to give room for John to escape. Micah flees like the rat he is, and our unsung hero finally falls prey to tuberculosis while looking out into the sunrise, where his story ends. 8 years after the death of Arthur Morgan, John Marston and his wife try to make a peaceful living with their son Jack at Pronghorn Ranch. He buys some land on Beecher's Hope to finally escape the shadows of his past and starts to work as a bounty hunter. But his little outlaw rises once again with excitement when he learns about the location of ex-crewmate and traitor, Micah Bell. John, Sadie, and Charles set out to put the lonely snitch down for good. But just as they're about to take him out, Dutch steps in with his guns locked and loaded, and is like, "Hold up, wait a second, I have a plan." Dutch shoots the living shit out of Micah, trying to redeem himself from his past mistakes. He gives all of the treasure from the Blackwater heist to his former gang members like it's Christmas, and disappears like Batman. I guess one of his plans worked after all. John and Abigail begin to settle peacefully into the ranch life like they always wanted, but on the other side, Pinkerton agent Edgar Ross starts investigating Micah's murder, throwing any hope for a happily ever after out the window. About 4 years later, Ross, now the head of the Bureau of Investigation, abducts John's family and holds him for ransom to force him to hunt down his old crewmates, Bill Williamson and Dutch Vanderlinde. And yeah, back then it was all legal. Fuck Uncle Sam, I guess. Anyways, John locates Bill at Fort Mercer, the headquarters of the Williamson gang in New Austin. Even though he was a hobo, he managed to get himself settled quite well. Of course, Bill is prepared and manages to shoot John on sight, knocking him out cold. John's life is saved by a rancher, Buddy McFarlane, and goddamn! Wait, no. John has a wife. Anyways, he has to work for Bonnie to repay her, and unfortunately, the work is out in the fields and not in her quarters. But Bill isn't done yet, so he sends his men to burn Bonnie's ranch to the ground. After saving her cattle, he joins forces with a local marshal and gains entrance to Bill's fort through the good old Trojan horse technique, only to learn that Bill has already bounced off to Mexico to hang up with Javier Escuela. Kinda ironic considering how Javier is the one who helped save John from those snow doggies earlier, but oh well. John travels to Mexico, which is in the middle of a political revolution at this point. John doesn't care much about petty politics, but tries to get along with any side that would lead him closer to Javier and Bill, which is the literal definition of politics. He initially sides with the military regime, but later on would try to play 4D chess on both sides of the conflict. And if you remember the gang's experience with trying to play both sides, you know that shit don't work. So of course, it doesn't work too well for John here either. He's about to be executed by the dictator Colonel Allende as soon as he learns of his two-faced tactics. But, like Randy Orton, the rebel leader Abraham Rice comes out of nowhere to save John's ass. Both men go on to find Javier, who informs them that Bill is hiding with Colonel Allende in his compound. John storms Allende's compound with Ray's men like a true Mexican rebel and deals with both Bill and the Colonel before they can flee into the sunset. Abraham Rice assumes power, and John comes back to West Elizabeth. With Bill gone, the hunt for his old leader Dutch now begins. John and Edgar, along with other Bureau agents, lead a series of operations throughout the region and ultimately corner Dutch and his gang at their hideout. After a shootout of the ages, John corners his former father figure on the edge of a cliff. Dutch is only a shadow of his past self at this point and looks worse than a boomer with dementia. He gives his final speech, saying that people like Edgar Ross will end up looking for a new monster after he's dead, basically pointing at the karma is a bitch theme we see often referred to in the world of Red Dead. And for old time's sake, Dutch has one last plan. Before John can kill him, Dutch decides to jump off the cliff, taking his life on his own accord. Unless his actual plan was to escape by jumping and it just failed, just like all of his plans. Knowing Dutch, both cases are equally likely. Wait, why did John do all of this again? Oh, right, to get his family back. Kinda forgot the whole point of the murderous rampage. Anyway, Edgar Ross keeps his promise and releases Abigail and Jack. The family reunites and beaches hope and lives the peaceful ranch life they had always dreamed of, at least for now. As crazy as Dutch might have been, his final words come back to haunt John when Edgar Ross attacks his ranch with a small militia of agents. He knows he can't fight all of them, but tries nonetheless. He takes his wife and son to the barn and tells them to escape. John accepts his fate like his old pal Arthur and faces the agents head-on while the others get a chance to escape, leaving Jack to continue his legacy. Eventually, Abigail passes away and their vengeful son Jack is all grown up, ready to continue in his father's footsteps. He tracks down Edgar Ross and challenges him to a duel. Of course, Jack wins because, yay, vengeance! And the credits roll. Subscribe or I'm going to eat your ice cream.